Soviet gates opened every morning, feeding men into factories that no one fully understood. Workers and soldiers passed through checkpoints under watchful eyes. Outside, civilians stood in endless lines, fighting hunger as much as they fought fear. Food was scarce, order was enforced, dissent was not tolerated. This was the new reality of post-war Berlin. And this was where Thomas arrived, not as a soldier, but as an observer. Across the city, the Allies were still trying to make sense of the peace they had won. Berlin was divided, but the future was not yet decided. In British operations rooms, officers studied reports, maps, and fragments of intelligence. Thomas was briefed carefully, quietly. His task was simple in theory, dangerous in practice. Observe, document, do not be seen. What the Soviets were doing inside Berlin mattered far beyond Germany, because whatever came next would not stay contained. Alone in the streets, Thomas weighed every step. In a city full of ruins, every shadow had meaning. After the surrender, Berlin was split into zones of control: British, American, French, and Soviet. On paper, the Allies were united. In reality, mistrust was already shaping the future. While leaders celebrated victory, civilians struggled to survive. Food shortages, destroyed infrastructure, and political uncertainty defined daily life. The Soviets tightened their grip on the eastern sectors. Checkpoints multiplied, surveillance increased. Every movement was watched. Maps were redrawn, not just of territory, but of influence. Allied forces remained on alert. Because peace, it seemed, was only temporary. The next conflict was already forming. Berlin bore the scars of total war, but the destruction was not only physical. Even as the rubble remained, ideology moved quickly. The Allies watched closely. Victory had ended the fighting, but not the struggle. Across the city, new lines were being drawn, not with weapons, but with power. And power, once claimed, is rarely surrendered. Communist influence spread through rallies and demonstrations. The Soviets worked to reshape Berlin from within. Loyalty was encouraged, resistance was discouraged. The city became a battleground of ideas, and not everyone agreed on the future. Thomas documented everything he could. Every photograph brought him closer and put him in greater danger. As Soviet control tightened, many tried to escape Berlin. The city was slowly being sealed. Food deliveries were restricted, supplies were cut. Hunger became a weapon. Families faced impossible choices. Some fled under cover of darkness, others stayed, hoping for relief. The Allies responded with aid where they could. Planes carried supplies over a city under pressure, but assistance could not erase fear. Berlin was becoming a prison, and prisoners eventually resist. Western allies organized food deliveries on an unprecedented scale. Day and night supplies were flown in to keep the city alive. Flour, canned food, and medicine became lifelines. It wasn't charity, it was strategy. Berlin was being fed to prove it would not be abandoned. Thomas understood the risk. Information alone was no longer enough. Tension finally broke into open resistance. Protests spread through the streets. Crowds challenged Soviet authority. The response was swift and brutal. Control was reasserted by force. Negotiation was no longer an option. Berlin had crossed a point of no return. What began as protest quickly turned into confrontation. Streets meant for rebuilding became spaces of resistance. For the Soviets, dissent was not a message. It was a threat. The Soviets chose a final solution. The city would be locked down. Barriers rose where streets once stood. Concrete replaced movement. Families were divided overnight. A wall became a message. Some tried to escape. Many failed. Every attempt carried a price. Freedom now required courage and luck. Across the divide, Western checkpoints stood alert. The city was no longer one. It had become a symbol, a warning, and a promise of what was coming. From above, the truth became clear. This wasn't a factory.